Hi there, my name is Daniel. I'm also known as the Board Scrambler, and I absolutely hate people. Okay, I don't hate all people obviously, but when I'm out in the mountains, like you can see where I am now here, I really don't like being part of a crowd. If there's a huge horde of people making their way up a mountain, that's really not my thing. I feel the purpose of coming out in the mountains like this is to enjoy the quietness and the wilderness and to try and get away from all the people. So if that sounds appealing to you, I have got 4 tips on how you can avoid the crowds on Snowdon, which is the tallest mountain in Wales. Okay, tip number 1 is to consider going up the Rhyddau path and then either come back down that path or go back down the Snowdon Ranger path. You can also do this in reverse. You could go up the Snowdon Ranger path and down the Rhyddau path. These 2 routes are on the quiet side of Snowdon. So compared to say the Llanberis path or the pig track and the miners track, they are very, very quiet. You will still see some people on there, but I've never seen hordes of people on either of these 2 routes. I've never seen people queuing or anything like this. So if you want to avoid the crowds, I think you should stay away from the Llanberis path. Try these 2 instead. Okay, my next tip is to go super early, and when I mean super early, I mean get into the car park like an hour before sunrise. I know some of you might be wincing at that and thinking there's no way I'm driving all that way in the middle of the night, but do you know what, in the middle of summer, if you can get to that car park nice and early and you're setting off, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes before sunrise, you'll be halfway up that mountain as the sun comes up. You will see some of the most beautiful scenery, which is lit by some of the most beautiful soft light. It is absolutely gorgeous up here early in the morning. You'll also find that it'll be much quieter. Probably only, even on the most popular path, there'll probably only be a handful of people on there in the summer at that time in the morning. It'll be much cooler as well, and you won't have to fight for a car parking space at that time. And of course you'll be down from the mountain by lunchtime, which means you can go out, find a nice pub somewhere and get a pub lunch when everybody else is still on the mountain getting hot, sunburnt and, you know, panting away because they've left it too late and they're out in the heat of the day in the middle of the hordes of people going up there. So tip number 2 is to just consider biting the bullet and saying, I'm going to go really early on this one. I've actually done night climbs before where I've gone up to the summit and stayed on the summit for sunrise, and it's absolutely stunning. It's almost always quiet during the early hours of the morning, and that lovely soft light, you know, lighting up all of the mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous. So if this is something that you might only do once or twice, why not just bite the bullet and say, I'm going to go really early on this one and just completely avoid the crowds. For me, I think it's worth getting up early and the hassle and having to drive through the night. Other people may disagree, but do consider going early. I don't think you'll regret it. Okay, tip number 3 is to consider going in the winter or early spring. Now, a lot of people balk at the idea of going up a mountain in winter, but it isn't always covered in snow up there. Actually, most of the time during the winter, Snowdon will not be covered in snow, and many of the paths are perfectly accessible. What you may find is you get the odd day in the winter where it's actually fairly warm, when there's no wind, the wind isn't biting into you. So you can see some footage here which I took in April, obviously springtime. I put the drone up and you can see there was nobody on the summit. I had the entire summit of the mountain to myself, and this wasn't a particularly cold day. I actually got so warm on the way up that I took my fleecy top off and just had a regular long sleeve t-shirt on. So I had the entire mountain to myself. I think I saw 3 people all day. It wasn't particularly cold, it wasn't windy, there's no biting wind. It was absolutely lovely. I had no problems with parking, there was no hordes of crowds or anything like that. So don't forget that the mountain isn't just there in the summer, it is there in the winter. You just need to be a little bit careful, check the weather and pick the right day. What you're looking for is obviously the wind, because that biting wind in the winter really cuts through you. So if there isn't too much snow on there and you haven't got that wind and it's not cloudy, you can actually have a really nice day on the mountains, and you might only see a handful of people up there. Okay, my final tip is to avoid weekends, especially bank holiday weekends. That's a big no-no for me completely. I try to avoid weekends in general. If I can go, I go during the week. I appreciate not everybody can take time off during the week, but if you can get a day off, it is going to be so much quieter during the week. It is a Tuesday here today. That's the Llanberis path behind me. not that many people on there. There was a few people earlier on the descent. There's maybe a dozen on there now that I can see. So it's a lot quieter during the week than on weekends, and bank holiday weekends are the worst, followed by weekends where you've got the school holidays. That's normally quite busy up here, but during the week, especially during the week outside of school holidays, it can actually be quite quiet on most of the routes up here. So there you go, there's 4 tips from somebody who's not a people person who wants to avoid the crowds on Snowdon. I hope that you found them helpful. If you have, do hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. My name is Daniel. I'm also known as the Board Scrambler. If you see me out on the mountains one day, don't forget to say hi.